I'm being wheeled. I mean, I could hear the wheels in the ambulance turning as if I was in a train. I could hear, you know. So I started to think that I'm in an ambulance. I'm a 15-year-old having all these thoughts, right? And I'm thinking, but it sounds like a train, but I'm in an ambulance. So anyway, I get to the hospital. I don't remember what happens from there to the hospital. When I'm in the hospital, I force my eyes open, and my thought was, my hair was so long that I kept thinking the wheels on the gurney are going to get caught. My hair will get caught in the wheels. So I'm thinking this, and I'm looking around, and finally I could open my eyes a little bit more, but I'm looking around, and all I see is the white walls. You know, I knew I was in a hospital. It looked like a hospital. Everything around me looked like a hospital. But then all of a sudden, I start to feel as if something was coming between the breast and this area. I felt my spirit forcing itself out of my body. I felt this pain coming out of me. And all of a sudden, the pain was on the right side of the corner where, you know, I'm looking up, and all of a sudden I feel myself leaving my body, and I'm staring from that corner looking down at my body. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this only happens in movies. This can't really be happening to me, you know, because I know, as you know, I've seen this on TV. You know, people die when this happens, when their spirit leaves their body. Am I dying? And I started to freak out. I started to think, oh my gosh, I'm dying. I'm dying. And when I thought about death, I felt as if, you know, fear came over me. An overwhelming fear came over me, and I could hear the doctors talking to patients. I could hear people talking to each other. I could hear every sentence as if, you know, it was just one person talking. And I thought to myself, you know, I've always, like I said, I've always believed there was a God. And I thought to myself, that's how God hears all of us. But, you know, I started to wonder if now I'm completely dead. When that fear came over me, I felt the fear come in as if it dragged me back into my body. It was so heavy. It felt like that fear was so ugly that it just fell back into my body. When I fell back into my body, I felt like all of me, not the separation any longer. I felt like all of me, the body and soul and the spirit, fell, and I began to fall as if somebody had dropped me out of an airplane. I felt so hard that I felt like my bones and my joints were going to break or fall apart, you know. I was just falling. I was so scared. And all of a sudden, I entered into a place that I just knew I was in hell. I had never read the Bible before. I remember just the words, you know, people saying go to hell, or, you know, words like that, but I never knew the meaning of hell. I never even believed that there was such a place. I mean, I didn't even think about it. And I thought to myself, as I'm falling, I'm thinking to myself, oh no, this is for eternity, because that's how I felt. I felt as if there was no way out. I was never going to leave this place. I began to feel like the walls were coming closer, as if it was breathing and separating. I felt like there was souls embedded into the walls around me, because that's how I could feel them so close to me. But yet I could feel like it was such a huge place. It was like so heated. I should have melted. My skin, my body should have fallen apart, because that's how hot it was in there. I want to say that the worst thing was that I couldn't breathe for once. It felt like there was no air. The other thing was the heat was so, you know, tremendously hot, and the hatred. Oh my gosh, the hatred to me was like the worst part of it all. The hatred was so ugly. I felt like, and I could hear the people around me screaming and just crying, and I could hear people cursing God. I could hear people first scriptures, and then all of a sudden cursing the Lord, and then all of a sudden I could hear just the cries of torment, people being tormented. I never forget one cry. I tell people that since this experience, that the one thing that kept me, I believe, always coming back to God and repenting was the fact that there was a woman that I know it was a woman, because I could hear her scream. It was just horrifying. The only thing I could imagine was that they had put her on a stretch bed and they were tearing her apart, that they were just tearing her apart, because that's how intense her cry was, that I felt it to the bone, to the marrow of my bone, because it was just so horrifying. But I also remember that as I was falling, I never hit rock bottom. The Bible says that there's a scripture in the Bible that says that there's the bottomless pit. I had never hit the bottom, but I kept falling. And as I was falling, I was experiencing like different places of hell. It was just so horrifying. And I remember crying out to God, because it's like I said, I've always believed there was a God. And I started to cry out to God and said, God, help me, help me. What did I do? What did I do? And I thought to myself, I don't belong here. This is not for somebody like me. I wasn't such a bad person. I didn't do anything to anybody. And then I started to wonder if it was because I had taken the drink. And I thought to myself, well, it wasn't even that much, as a teenager, you think this way. And I started to just cry out to God, and I just said, God, help me, please help me, get me out of here, get me out of here. And I remember just crying, but I kept feeling the hopelessness that was it for eternity. I was never going to leave this place, and I wanted out so bad. And I kept saying, please, God, get me out, get me out. What did I do? What did I do? And as I cried out, I know now that when I cried from the heart. I felt that God heard my cry, because it was so real that I cried out with all that I had. And I said, Lord, get me out of here, get me out. And I remember from one second to the next, I was out of that place. I was just completely out. I didn't feel that hatred, that horrifying place. It was just awful. But I was in awe by where I was, because where I ended up was in a place of, I didn't see pearly gates. I didn't see, streets of gold. I didn't see castles or angels or nothing like that. I was just in another room where it was like in the air, but I knew it was a closed place. I felt like there was a wall that we were not allowed to get up and wander around, because I could feel the presence of two other souls on the side of me. I didn't bother to look who they were, because I didn't care. I was just so relieved that I was no longer where I was, And in this place, I was on my knees. I knew I had a robe on, mid-calf. How I know that, I don't know. But I know I had a robe on. There was people on the side of me, and I know that they were in, the same robes as I was. I remember that as I was there, I could feel a peace that I had never felt here on the earth. I remember that when the Lord began to walk into the room, there was a presence that entered. There was a light that came off of lights, colors, that I don't know how to describe, except that I knew there was a being inside this light, that there was a silhouette of a form of a man. And I know now that it was Jesus who walked into that place, because as he came towards us, it was like the ocean. It just kept coming. You know how the ocean just keeps coming and stops and comes and stops? Well, I felt like Jesus' love was like that. It was so powerful. It was just so amazing. It was the greatest love I'll ever know. I know I'll never know it here on the earth. I used to say the father of my children that passed away now, but when we were kids, we met as young people, teenagers. We fell in love and got married young. I always thought that was going to be the greatest love I'll ever experience, because we truly loved each other, but it's not. God's love is so much greater, so much greater. You'll never know that love here on this earth. But let me tell you, it just kept coming and coming and coming. And as he came closer, I could feel his presence. We knew automatically, out of reverence or respect, or whatever you want to call it, I knew to bow before him. I could feel the other two souls bowing too. And as I began to bow down, I remember putting my hands in front of my face, wanting to look. I just wanted to see him. I wanted to see everything about him. And I had my hands in front of my eyes, and I kept looking at him. And I remember when he got closer, I went all the way to the ground. I mean, all of me was completely flat on the ground, and just in worship and reverence of who he was. And let me tell you, as he got closer, I could feel his presence. So I had to lift my head and I looked at his feet. His feet were like bronze, almost like the color of, you know, I'm American Indian and my color is pretty dark, but let me tell you, his was like a gold and brown, and it was so beautiful, so shiny, so just soft. And I saw the robe as he lifted me. He put his hand on my right side, and he began to lift me up, and I saw his feet, you know, his robe, and as I continued to look up, I saw the rope that was around his waist, and it was entwined. It was 3, and it was like tied up in the front, and it was like burned on each end. And it reminded me of what my grandmother used to tell me, that in the olden days, that when she used to own, you know, a barn and animals or whatever, that when they used to tie the animals, they used to burn the edges so that they wouldn't come undone. And that's what it reminded me. But I felt like the Lord was showing me his humbleness towards me, that I was no different than he was. He made me feel like I was just like him. You know, his robe was the same color as mine. It was like an off-white. It wasn't pure white. It was off-white. By this time I could see a beam. I could see his robe. I didn't see all the other colors. Let me tell you, the colors that I saw were colors we'll never see here on earth. The brightness of hot pink was like more prettier, more brighter. I love pink. And red was just so red, and all the beautiful colors. White was just amazing. It was just so awesome. I get excited when I talk about it because I can't wait to get back. But let me tell you, it was just so amazing. Colors that we see here are not even the colors that are in heaven. They're so much more beautiful. You know, the colors there that was coming off of him were so beautiful. And as he lifted me up, I remember him saying, "You must go back. You must go back and tell the truth." And I was thinking to myself, but I don't want to go back. I want to stay. I want to stay. And he answered me. I didn't even have to open my mouth. He said, "But you must go back. You must tell the truth about hell, because today the pastors and preachers and teachers are afraid to lose the number." I didn't understand what that meant. The Lord said that it's not taught. People are afraid to lose, you know, the number in the church. Maybe the money, because if people don't come, they don't get money. Or maybe it's the other way around. You know, not that I'm against, you know, giving, because we have to. I mean, everybody pays electricity and a place, right, for a space. But so the pastors do this. But those that are truly, you know, serving the Lord, they get paid income, right? And they pay for the bills and all, but those that are not, you know, those are the ones that are afraid to lose the number, losing the people. But God showed me that in my dream, and he told me, he says, "You must go back now." And as he told me that, I remember leaving his presence. And as I began to leave his presence, I began to just cry out, because now I can literally feel the tears and the hurt leaving the presence of the Lord. So I must have been out of that dimension of where I was before and leaving the Lord. And I remember feeling the pain of where I was returning. And they had this tube down my throat, and they were pumping my stomach.